Welcome back to Borderlines. Sorry about that. Apologies. My guest was on time. Our technical issues somehow didn't allow us to start as planned. So unfortunately, we've lost some 10, 12 minutes after the news that I should have been talking to him. But let me introduce him. Mr. Azu Ishiekwene, I hope I pronounce it right. He is a senior vice chairman, editor in chief of Leadership Group newspaper. He is the senior, he's also an editor and an author and executive director of Punch. I think he's based in Abuja, and he runs and he's chairman of Open Fees, NGO for indigent students. Azu, welcome. And he's a colleague. He's been in the industry for a very long time. It will tell us how long, so you guys don't accuse me of exaggerating. Azu, welcome to Borderlines. My name is Ireti Bakare-Yusuf, in case they haven't told you.
Ireti, thanks for having me, and thanks for that introduction. Although you made me feel a bit like Methuselah by the way you introduced me. Just a slight point of correction.
Go ahead, please.
I'm not with Punch. I used to be, of course, with the Punch.
Right.
But as you said correctly, I'm currently editor-in-chief of Leadership. I'm a journalist, a columnist, and an author. Thanks for having me.
How long have you been a journalist, if I may ask? Because of course I know your name.
Just for a short 36 years. Yes.
That's a whole load of short 36 years. So you wrote an article which was published, I believe, yesterday, and it's called "A Nation at War: 5 Days in Israel" by Azu. First and foremost, I need to ask you the question. You call it a nation at war, which then implies there is two nations fighting. Why that title?
Well, I mean, a nation can be at war against itself, isn't it? But a nation can also be at war with other nations.
Right.
But in this specific case, Israel obviously is at war in Gaza, but it's almost verging on a regional war, because also it's a war, as we have seen for the last 550 days, that has drawn other combatants as well. So Israel is also not just currently enmeshed in Gaza, it's also enmeshed in Lebanon, which is the north of Israel, and is also taking hits also from Yemen, from the Houthis in Yemen. So of course, Iran has also been enmeshed in the war somehow. So yes, Israel is the war in the Middle East is not just between Israel and Gaza, but Israel is currently at war with its neighbors.
Okay.
A number of its neighbors.
So you specifically went to Israel, right, for 5 days. You said
That's correct.
Right. How did that trip happen?
Okay, so in January last year, I must be careful to know that we're in a new year already.
Of
but
course.
in January 2023, that must be.
Right, 2023, the
yes,
year before.
January,
So last year was 24,
yes,
2023.
so I got an invitation to that, to be in Israel, but I sort of turned down that invitation. I couldn't make it. And so the invitation was renewed again late last year, late 2024. And I sort of seized the opportunity just also to keep myself abreast of. So it was on the invitation of the Foreign Ministry of Israel, actually, that I went with 8 other journalists from 7 other African countries.
Right. Okay. So why, if I may ask, what was it? You went in January 2023, which obviously was the year before.
No, I turned down the invitation.
You turned down the invitation.
Yes,
when you say you were
then went
invited,
last year.
You were invited
Yes,
by whom?
By the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, obviously.
Okay, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs or their ministry?
The Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not Nigeria's Ministry of Foreign
Okay, all right. Can I ask, was there a particular reason for that invitation?
Well, there are a number of reasons. I obviously think that they wanted journalists to sort of come and see what was happening. So it was both a professional and it was essentially a professional tour. But also I took time to see a few places of interest in Israel because it was my first visit. So the whole point of it was
the January
sort of,
tour I was talking about. So the
yes,
January,
no,
why
the
they
January
wanted
tour I did not. I did
but
not go in January.
I'm just asking, why did
I'm
they want
talking
you
about-
to come then? Why did they want you to come in January?
Oh, well, the war. I guess the war at that time. The war at that time was. I hope I'm not getting it mixed up.
I think you are. I think you are.
Yes, I think I must have meant January 2024, not January 2023.
Okay.
But the war actually started in October, on October 7th, 2023.
Correct. Which is why I was curious, because you did write in your article.
Yeah, it was 2024. Yes, it
right.
was 2024.
Right, because you wrote in your article that you are turned down an invitation to go January 2023. And I was curious about that. Okay, so let's go into your article, because of course we're running out of time, unfortunately, thanks to Zoom. So you start with perhaps 3 will be the lucky number after at least 2 previous failed attempts. A peace deal between Israel and Hamas might be reached by January 20th or in the early days of Trump's second time. Why 3?
Because there had been at least 2 known attempts at signing a peace deal between Israel and Hamas, and those 2 attempts coordinated, of course, by Egypt and Qatar, with the US also involved and some other top regional players, did not hold. I understand that the parties are close to a third, to signing off a third deal. And so my hope and prayer, and as I guess that of other peace-loving people of the world, is that this third one will hold.
Okay.
So it's just an expression of a hope.
Okay. Well, there wasn't 3. There's been about 6. Actually, there's been about 6 attempts. The first one actually ended up being, there was a ceasefire, I think it was 7 days or so, where there was the exchange of hostages. So there has actually, since then, there's been 6 as of the time you went. There were actually
but there has been 3. Yes, I mean,
as of the time you went in December,
the major ones, yes.
Every single one is major, because every single one is major. Whether it happens, that's why we call them attempts. But every single one has been major. And whilst Qatar is in the middle of that, the latter ones have not actually been with Egypt. They've really been Qatar, Anthony Blinken going back and forth and stuff. So that's why I was curious about when you wrote 3. But let's go further into your article. So you said, I want to ask, because you expressed there that the fear of going to Israel, given that, there's this sort of this ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. Right? Remember, we had the Lebanon war. Were you afraid? What were you most afraid of, actually?
Well, when you are going to a war zone, you're quite naturally apprehensive about your personal safety. But I guess that obviously is human. I was fairly apprehensive of my personal safety because there had been a ceasefire, but that ceasefire was only hanging by a thread. So I was personally
the ceasefire with Lebanon, right? The one with Lebanon.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
So it was only hanging by a thread. So this part of the itinerary was not just to be in Tel Aviv, but also to go up north to the border between Lebanon and Israel, which is also one of the hot spots of the conflict. So quite naturally, anyone going to a war zone will be concerned about their safety, and my case was not different.
So it was interesting because I did the same trip that you did in December. So October the 7th happened. So you had October, November. So October the 7th happened. By October 8 and 9, Israel had declared war on Gaza, and I went in December of that same year of 2023.
Of 2022.
Yes.
Okay.
It's interesting. I noticed some of the things you mentioned. You talked about Kibbutz Be'eri. Tell us what you saw in Kibbutz Be'eri by the time. So you've gone December 2023. So you went last month effectively. So tell us what you saw in Kibbutz Be'eri. or did you not go
Well,
to Kibbutz Be'eri?
Kibbutz Be'eri, as I said in my article, is just about 5 kilometers from Gaza.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was one of the epicenters of the attacks of October the 7th. And we were received and conducted on a trip there by a woman called Ella, who took us into her home and shared with us the very frightening, obviously very traumatic experience she had with her family on October the 7th, beginning from around 6 morning when that community came under attack. And obviously, it's one of the oldest kibbutz in Israel and one of the closest to the border with Gaza. And it was one of the most impacted. We saw, obviously, buildings still significantly ruined and damaged. And I think from the records, about 120 people were killed when the attack happened on the morning of October 7th. So it's still largely a community that's trying to come to terms with the tragic events of October 7th. That was what I saw.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was there when the wreckage was still live, if you like, when, nothing had been cleaned up. We saw lots of devastation. This is kibbutz. Fayatza. That's the one we went to, which again is near Kibbutz Be'eri, because there's also the barbed wire 5K that separates it from Gaza to Israel, if you like, right? Now, here's one of the things that's one of the things that shocked me. I don't know how you felt when you saw it, because when I saw it, I looked at the barbed wire, and like you can see, I don't know whether you looked ahead, you were able to look ahead, but if you look up yonder in those 5 miles, you could see Gaza. And I kept asking, why barbed wire on the other side when you have what David Cameron calls the world's largest open air prison? And I wondered what would inform that form of that sense of, I'm trying to find the right word. It's almost complacency. Do you get what I'm saying? Did you not think that?
Well, obviously from the conversations and interactions we had with Ella and a few other persons around there, this is a community that's been there for a very long time, and they're pretty. They used to bomb sirens going off from time to time as a result of attacks from the other side. It's not a community that is a stranger to this sort of conflict anyway. But I guess what happened on the 7th of October was different from what they had experienced these past years. Particularly intense. Help did not come as early as they hoped or expected it would come. For many hours on that day, many families in that place didn't exactly know what was going on. And they had their own community, small community security, but obviously because the Hamas attackers came in their numbers, the community security was overpowered, and as I said, records indicate that at least 120 people were killed. But as regards you talked about the wire.
Well, it was just a barbed wire.
If you stand in Kibbutz Be'eri, as you said, you can virtually see.
Yes,
Gaza.
Yes, I saw it.
So,
but it's interesting, like you said, they've been going through that, and when you think there is a people that have been locked in what David Cameron called an open air prison, and then there's an immediate free community, Israeli community, who is just five kilometers away, who are only guarded by barbed wire. You start to wonder.
Yes, Ireti.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you're quoting David Cameron, who, as you say, described this as an open prison. But
the world's largest open air prison.
Yes, but if you also reflect on the role that Britain played in the current conflict, I do not think that in retrospect is one that they'll be proud of.
Oh,
You
yes.
probably remember. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yes, I can. I can hear you.
Hello?
Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hello?
I can hear you. Can we? Yes, I can hear you, Azu. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, it would appear that we're having technical problems again, and our technical team are going to try and get Azu, we get the audio back on so we can continue this conversation, because I'm not quite sure what happened. I could hear Azu, but he couldn't hear me. Azu, are you back?
Yes,
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Ireti?
Yes, I can.
Yes, I was sorry about that.
No
glitch.
problem at all.
I was referring to the comment you made about David Cameron calling Gaza the world's largest open prison. And I was saying it's quite ironic that he would use that phrase, that expression, because you will probably remember that that the entire land of Palestine was a British mandate between 1920 and 1948.
Yeah.
And if Britain had done the right thing by the people, instead of promising the Jews one thing and then turning around and promising the Arabs the other, perhaps we might not be where we are today. So it's ironic that many decades after, David Cameron then calls that place an open prison, when Britain indeed had the opportunity of creating a different outcome when that place was a mandate.
Well, this is... No, you're right. You're right. I mean, we have Balfour. You're talking about Lord Balfour. We had Lord Balfour to blame for that, right? And he was an anti-Semite, interestingly, but yet he's the one that went ahead and actually gifted the land of Palestine. Now, when I quote David Cameron, I'm referring to, in fact, what many human rights, even the UN, they call the fact that Gaza has been under siege since 2007. Remember, when Israel pulled out of Gaza, they built a wall. And as a result of building that wall, they have been in total and absolute control of Palestinians who live in Gaza, including the amount of calories that they could eat. And I was surprised, I have to say, Azu, as a senior journalist, I didn't see that in your article. But let's go back to what you said when you rightly said it's the British, they're the ones that give the land away. But you put in your article, you said about land, and I'm quoting here, you said, while pro-Palestinian sentiments framed the question as essentially one of decades of oppression and injustice arising from a land grab, several Israeli officials I met on this trip dismissed such sentiments, citing two instances. One in 1979, Israel ceded the Sinai Peninsula, twice the size of Israel, to Egypt as a peace offering. Two, in 1993, after Yitzhak Rabin signed the Oslo Accords with Arafat under a deal supervised by the US President Bill Clinton to prevent the creation of new settlements and paved the way for a two-state solution. Top PLO officials, including Arafat, later described the accord as a strategic maneuver before, quote-unquote, the Great Jihad. I'm curious, given that you mentioned Bridge and you've just literally mentioned that history to me, you didn't actually insert the history, albeit maybe just a paragraph, in your article. And even more so, this part about land, you quote the Israeli officials and you don't quote Palestinian leaders as to what they're saying. You say pro-Palestine sentiments. Why that? Why that omission?
Well, Ireti, I will take it that this is not an inquisition regarding my trip. And even if it was one, I reserve the right not to answer if I don't want to answer. But the point, to come to your question directly, is that what you're reading is probably the fifth or sixth article that I have written on the renewed conflict between Israel and Gaza. And my trip, as I said to you at the beginning of this conversation, was just to be an eyewitness to hear the story of what persons impacted in Israel are saying. It's not a retraction of the previous articles that I've written. And you can go and check. And I've written scathing articles about the management of the conflict by the current leadership of the Israeli government. And so it's this is just telling the story from the eyes. I have written articles extremely scathing. So it is not this one article that justifies or condemns my position. I do not accept that. I do not accept it at all, that I should have necessarily. I went there to talk to ordinary people and to reflect their sentiments. And as I said to you, this is probably the 5th article or the 6th I've written since October 7th.
Okay.
Over half of them extremely scathing, and it's not a retraction. This is not a retraction of my position. All right. But you see, if I get an invitation as a journalist, if I get an invitation, and I do look forward to an invitation to go to Gaza, I would.
Well, we will both be going together, Azu, because I'm waiting for my invitation.
Well, you know. So I mean, that really is the point. What I expressed there, quite obviously, even within the Israeli society, there are people within Israel itself who do not agree with the way Netanyahu has managed this war. All right. And I have said that in not more than one, not one, not two, not even 3 articles that I do not agree. And I do not think that my not saying it every time I write an article diminish the value of what I saw and what I have shared. I disagree with that.
Okay, so let's talk about what, especially, and I'm glad you said that you've written several articles. When you look at the war today, I call it a genocide. I started calling it a genocide after what's the name? Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur, actually wrote a report titled The Anatomy of a Genocide. Many people, many of our colleagues, when I say people, well, forget the people, many of our colleagues also call it a genocide. But you still call it a war. Do you agree that it's a genocide?
I do not, it's what I think, or an appellation or a description of the situation in Gaza, it's appalling. I abhor and strongly abhor the extent of humanitarian, carnage in that place and the loss of lives in Gaza and also in Israel. Children, journalists, women, vulnerable people. It should not really come to this, to be honest. The loss of one life, the loss of a single life is bad enough. All right. So it is not what I think or what I describe the current conflict that provides a solution to it. No, I do not.
But as journalists, we have a responsibility to. It's not about what we think. I mean, I can't call it a genocide because I'm not that expert. But if the experts, including the ICJ,
if you just give me a moment, just hold on a minute.
Okay.
Look, already the ICC has issued a notice asking the Israeli Prime Minister, the former defense minister, and the leader of Hamas, unfortunately,
who's dead.
Yes, who's dead, unfortunately, to come and answer questions regarding the conduct of the war. I would wait and I would hope that they would yield and respond to that and go and answer questions regarding the conduct of that particular war. So it's not if I call it genocide or whether I decide to call it genocide or I don't call it. I believe, and Nigeria is also a signatory. Nigeria is a signatory to that to the ICC. I believe that if you are called, you should go and act the same way they went when South Africa took Israel to the ICC. They went there and they defended themselves. I do believe that the proper thing will be for the leadership of the current Israeli government to answer to the charges against it before the ICC. I think so.
Well, so in that case then, again, because the thing that I do say, and there's been part of the big conversations as a result of this genocide, is about us journalists and the narratives they put out, especially, of course, there's the Western journalists are getting a lot of the criticism, and we all know how they tend to frame things, which is why I actually said, if you refer to it as a war and several experts on genocide, including the UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, has repeated over and over again that Israel is committing a genocide. The fact that when you think of the language that Israel, remember, genocide is not about numbers, even though 45,000 have been killed in Gaza so far. Right? Genocide is not about numbers. It's also about the language and whether that language is then carried out. It's about dehumanization. When the Israeli defense minister called Palestinians human animals, when the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu actually proclaimed Amalek and said Amalek, and I believe you're a Christian, you know what it means by Amalek and all of that stuff. That language and several others like it, Smotrich and all of them, is one of the reasons that actually underscores it as a genocide. And that's, for us as journalists, we have a responsibility to actually represent and, these issues and events and situations, especially one that is ongoing, given that this is the first live televised, or should I say, live televised, if you read social media, genocide that we're seeing in the world. That's why I was asking why you call it a war, not a genocide.
Ireti, the choice of, I would be very reticent to take lectures regarding the choice of words that I used in an article that I've expressed, in which I've expressed my opinion. If you hold the view and opinion that it's a genocide, then I mean that's fine. But I have described it as a war, and whether it's one life lost, as I said, whether it's 45,000 lives lost so far, as you have said, every day life is lost in the Middle East, in Gaza especially, or in Israel, is one life too many. And as you have said at some point in this conversation, which I believe it is, several attempts have been made to ensure that people who have conducted this war on either side are brought to account and held to account for how the war is prosecuted. And I'm fully in support of that. I would also like to make the point, if I may,
please,
that
ahead.
Even within Israel, as I said earlier, remember that Israel, 20% of Israel's population are Arabs. There are others as well. But there are also, even amongst the Jews, even amongst Israelis themselves, there are disagreements about how the war has been conducted and whether the Prime Minister has conducted the war responsibly. All right, and that conversation is healthy and should continue. All right, but it's the interesting thing, and one of the things that also struck me from the visit is that while it is possible within the Israeli community to have diverse opinions about the conduct of the war, from ordinary people to experts, people who agree, people who don't agree, and so forth and so on, I am not so sure whether you would, on the other side, whether you would have people who will come out to say, look, the way Hamas within that community, the way Hamas is conducting this war is not correct. I do not know whether, perhaps when I go there and I meet people, I don't know whether you can still hear me, because
yes, I can. I just didn't want to. No, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Can you still hear me?
Can you hear me? Yes, I can.
Hello?
Yes, I can. I can hear you. Oh dear, network is going again. Yes, are you back?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay.
I think that's the point. Anyway, so my point is that I do hope and believe that all those conducting the war, whether on the Israeli side or on the side of will keep it in mind that someday they will have to account for every life lost during this unfortunate and totally. I do hope that they keep that in mind. And
I need to ask your opinion. Okay, I need to ask your opinion because you've mentioned it twice about Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. They have a warrant against them by the ICC, of course.
ICC, that's correct.
Of course, Ishmael Haniyeh is dead, and Dave. Well, and they call him Dave, Israel says they've already killed him, although Hamas has not confirmed that he's dead. Let's go back to that warrant. Do you honestly... Hello, can you hear me? Oh dear, the network has frozen again. Oh, okay, are you back?
I can hear you.
Right, okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. Well, you've said you'd sincerely hope that they will answer. Do you honestly believe that Benjamin Netanyahu will, and Yoav Gallant, will actually stand on trial for the war crimes that they've committed in Gaza? Do you honestly believe that?
Well, what I believe is not important. What is important is what they have been asked to do. I would hope
in your
that
opinion, as a veteran journalist,
obviously, they have their defense or their response has been that Israel is not a signatory to ICC, therefore it does not. They have also argued that UN institutions have inbuilt what they call inherent bias against Israel. Whether they believe that or not, it's up to them. But I do honestly hope, that's my hope, that everyone who has conducted this on either side, whether it's the Netanyahu or Gallant or on the Hamas side, will understand that at some point they would have to account for every single life lost. The Israeli leadership and the Israeli society has argued consistently that Israel is not a signatory to ICC and therefore is obliged to answer to ICC. Well, I do not think so. I think that I think that both Hamas leaders and leaders of the current Israeli government have the responsibility to be held to account and to answer for the way the war in Gaza has been conducted.
Let's talk about our colleagues in Gaza. So far, an estimated 217 journalists have been killed. But again, I have to say, you know, I'm not attacking, but I've got to say, it wasn't in your article. Is it because you've written about it in the past? Because they keep, just last month, I think 3 journalists or 4 were killed at the same time. And Israel, this genocide, has seen the most journalists killed in a conflict.
So what is your question, Ireti? What is your question?
What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts? And also, why didn't you include it in your article?
I'm sorry?
I said, what are your thoughts on that? I don't know whether the network is alive.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
My heart goes out. My heart goes out to every single journalist that has been killed in the line of duty. It's regrettable. It should not have happened.
But it's not regrettable. They were killed. Israel killed them with 2,000-pound bombs that is thrown in Gaza. When we talk, no, I'm sorry, when we say regrettable, that's an accident on the street.
Ireti, no. Ireti, please, if you would like me to continue with this interview, then please, I urge you to allow me to finish before you make your interventions. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
If you already have your position and you know all the facts, I don't think I have any business continuing on your show.
Okay.
So I will urge you to exercise some restriction and grant me as your guest some respect to express my view before you respond. And my view, I said, my heart goes out to every single journalist that has been killed in Gaza, all right, in the course of this war. It's a regrettable thing that it was ever done at all, that they should be killed in the line of duty. But I also know, because you asked me the question at the beginning of this interview, how I felt at the time I was going there. Every journalist who also goes to, every journalist who also goes to a war zone is not unmindful of the hazard that he or she faces. Does that mean that journalists should be killed deliberately because they are in a war zone? No, even in war, there are rules of engagement. And I was hoping that, my hope is that all the parties would observe the rules of engagement, not just for the journalists, but for humanitarian workers in that place, for children, and for vulnerable people who are not military targets. There is no reason why people who are not military targets in any war should be killed. Because even in a war, there are rules of engagement. And that is also part of what I expect when I say that all those who have conducted the war on either side should expect to be held to account. That's exactly what I mean. You know, whether it's for the journalists who were killed in the line of duty, whether it's for humanitarian workers who have been killed, whether it's for every attack on a non-military target ought to be accounted for. That's what I believe.
I agree with you. Pardon me for interrupting you earlier, but the reason I interrupted you is the word regrettable. I think regrettable is when somebody's crossing over and unfortunately there's a car coming along or they didn't look. That's regrettable.
But,
You've just asked me, Azu,
yes.
you've just asked me not to interrupt you.
No, but I mean,
you've just asked me. We're colleagues. We're colleagues.
Go on. Go ahead.
We're colleagues. We're colleagues.
Yes.
So I think when the deliberate over 7,000 bombs, 2,000-pound bombs, these are the bombs that are supplied by the United States, which are known to actually fragment. When they fragment, they kill several people within a diameter around it. When Israel is dropping those bombs with air raids, I think regrettable is something of a soft word or to use for it, because it is intentional. Nobody regrettably drops a bomb. People, when countries drop bomb on another country, it is not regrettable. That's what I think. I think it is intentional. So this is where I was going. But unfortunately, because we're running out of time, what do you expect Donald Trump to do now? I would say, what do you expect him to do, or what do you think he's going to do?
I honestly have no idea what Donald Trump is going to do, but I think he has given some signals. I think he has given some indications that he's serious about bringing this war to an end, and is interested in doing so as quickly as possible. Well, some people have said that those indications are negative in the sense that some of the persons he has appointed as either mediators or foreign secretaries are people who have strong bias against the Palestinians and against what is happening in Gaza. But I think that Donald Trump, because of his concern about putting America first, I believe that he understands that if to focus on the thing, on his promises to America and to put America first, he needs also to face what is happening at home and deal with the issues that he has promised to deliver to the American people. I am hoping and praying that if not on the 20th, then certainly before then, at around about that time, that steps will be taken along with other partners in the region to bring this war to an end as quickly as possible. I hope it's going to be one of his top drawer issues, because it's just about time.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I hope your hope is correct and it comes to fruition. But one of the things that many people are concerned about, of course, is the fact that Donald Trump is also friends with Benjamin Netanyahu. His son-in-law is Jewish, is married to Ivanka, and we know one of the things that happened, especially as Donald Trump, through Jared Kushner, was leading the Abraham Accord to try to normalize things. One of the things that I did, again, I have to say this, and it's not to attack you, it's just because when I saw the article, I noticed there wasn't any mention of the Palestinians, the cause of the Palestinians. You mentioned about 19,000 rockets that have been dropped, that have been, bombarded. Israel had sent since the war, and some, of course, to Tel Aviv, where you go to. And I agree with you. I, too, was scared when I was there. There were bombs going on around us. We had to put on helmets and, what do you call those things? The body armor stuff and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I know exactly what you're talking about. They wouldn't take us to the West Bank, but we have to talk about the West Bank, because irrespective, Hamas doesn't run the West Bank. Yet Israel continues to actually arrest and hold Palestinians in the West Bank, not in Gaza, continues to hold them in what is called administrative detention, which effectively is no charges. You're just in detention. It gets renewed every 3 months or something. When you concluded your article, you wrote against all odds. It's a measure of Israel's resistance that, despite the war, and disagreements even within Israel about how best to handle the war and the return of the remaining 100 hostages. Despite Hamas information machinery that brooks neither dissent nor filters, Israel is still standing. What do you mean by Israel's resistance? I have to ask because...
Ireti, I did not say Israel's resistance. If you read that carefully, I said resilience.
Resilience, sorry. I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
I meant resilience.
So what's your question?
Oh, God, I think we have to go. Is that correct? Right. Okay. Unfortunately, oh gosh, we ran out of time because of all the technical issues. I have to go because apparently the news is coming on. Azu, I'll be in touch. You and I are going to be going to Gaza together by God's grace.
I'm happy and I'm ready to go when you are.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And I'm going
Thanks
to
for
dig
having
for your other articles, by the way.
No, please. I would. You don't even have to dig. I will just forward all the links to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Have a good
Thanks
weekend.
for having me.
Thank you.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye. Yes.
Long-lasting fragrance all day. That's my secret confidence.
Wazobia perfume is available in body spray.
Also available in supermarkets and markets near you. Wazobia perfume, the correct scent.
Happy New Year from Pop
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.